Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 15 of CorpDev.Ninja. It is Thursday, September 24th, 2020. And I have a special guest here today, good friend of mine as well and colleague. He's the one that showed me the podcast and video game and actually inspired me to create one myself quite a while back. It took me a long way to get to this point. I was a little slow, but we got Ben Smith on. What's up, Ben?
Hey, how are you? How are you today, Andres?
Doing well. Yeah, we're actually working on a couple of things together, Ben and I, the past couple of months. So he knows that maybe more busy than I would like to be. But today's a good day.
Yeah, we're collaborating now. It's exciting.
How does it feel to collaborate with the CorpDev.Ninja?
You know, it was
I'm
always
not sure whether it feels sad for you or
no, look, I mean, I've always looked up to you. I don't want to compliment you too much too early, but I will say I've always looked up to you in terms of your corporate development skills and ninja-ness, and you've helped me over the last few years when I've had an issue or a deal come up. You've been a great mentor in that way. So I do appreciate that.
Well, likewise, Ben, you've also been a mentor to me. So ninja recognize ninja, as they like to say, right? How are you holding up? So you're in Los Angeles. You're not too far from me. How are things on your end, just in general, living the life? I always ask people this question. Eventually, it's going to be
you can probably hear my kids in the background at this very second. But I have three little ones. I have a 5.5-year-old girl, and I have twin boys who are 3.5. So COVID was like a nice smack in my booty this year, and I basically learned how to get by, and doing 10 hours of work in about 3.5 per day, and then somehow hit the playground. And I mean it's working out. And strangely enough, I would say we've just seen such a rapid acceleration of everything in sort of tech and
right.
VC and corp dev, and everyone's making moves. I think I think when you look at the stock market, you'll see volume actually go massively up when the market goes down. And I think you're seeing sort of the same thing happen here, where there's so much corporate development happening on many levels. You have startups going crazy. It's such a good time. So I'm just trying to take it all in from all sides.
I mean, and you have a really interesting story that we'll dive into a minute across not only your professional and corporate life and your entrepreneurial life, your advisory life. You also have a startup as well and there's several interesting things about you that we'll get into. But yeah, in terms of corporate development and just business opportunities, it is like a weird twilight kind of period, because things and like opportunities that I was not sure or clear would happen this year have, and those that I thought that would did not. And so anything from like investing in venture capital and some of the stuff that we're working on and funding companies and advisor, it is a really unique time. So with that, I'd like to give folks your background. Ben Smith, or Ben, is a serial entrepreneur and managing partner of Chancebending Ventures, a digital media investment firm, as well as a full-service digital consulting agency servicing early-stage startups to Fortune 500 clients. Ben previously founded Blayze, acquired by Vobile, and is it Vobile or Vobile?
It's Vobile.
Vobile. I always pronounce this in different ways. Vobile in February 2014. Prior to that, Ben was an early Google and YouTube business person behind YouTube's biggest partnerships and strategic efforts. Ben created many first of its kind social media partnerships on the web and led YouTube's efforts with Hollywood for years. That's pretty cool, Ben. He helped bridge the gap between Hollywood and Silicon Valley, leaving YouTube HQ to be the company's first business person in LA in 2008. So that is, and by the way, you have a lot more things to talk about and experience points that we'll get into, but love that background. You are a true business ninja. First question: how did you find Google early on? Like, and how did your path to tech and Google and YouTube come about? When I joined, my first job was at Microsoft, and I joined Microsoft in 2000. I applied in 2003 and then joined in 2004. And Google at that point was still quite small. And I knew that they were up to something big. I didn't know how big they could potentially be. So hats off to going there early. How did you find them, and how did you what was your path there?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for reading my bio. It's so funny when you hear that when someone else reads it. It does make me feel slightly old, but that's okay. But yeah, when young people, I've spoken at a number of universities. They're always like, hey, so how did Google happen? And I always encourage young people, follow your heart. I mean, I always fashioned myself like a Jack Kerouac, James Dean figure back when I had hair. Like when I was, I don't know, right out of college, 2021. Yeah. And I found myself wandering, just trying different things. I was in New York City, and then I had a friend.
Ben is a 22-year-old in New York City. Oh my God.
It was pretty debaucherous, but another different podcast on that one. But I had a friend in Singapore who was, strangely enough, he was acting in commercials and TV shows in Singapore, and he was like, "Hey Ben, come out, be an actor with me." And I'm like, "Nah, man, I don't want to be an actor. I want to be a producer." So I went to Singapore. My friend and I started we started producing commercials and TV shows for the Asian market.
Which year was this? Which year in Singapore?
It was 2002. So,
and how long were you there for? Just out of curiosity.
Like about a year.
Okay. Yeah. I was also in Singapore around 2003 for a little bit, so I may have overlapped on the island with you. But that was just a trip. That was a pass through. Wow. Interesting. Okay, so 2003. Got it.
And so I had a blast. We were making really cool stuff. I was having a great time, and I didn't know what exactly I wanted to do. And my sister went to Stanford. She's living in Palo Alto. I went to come visit her while I was sort of thinking about what to do. And I was like, should I go to business school? Should I be the P. Diddy of Asia? Because that was sort of like the direction I thought I wanted to go. And she had a friend, a mutual friend named Jeff Gillis. Jeff, wherever you are, hello. And Jeff was really early on at Google. And Elizabeth was like, look, Jeff is doing well. And Jeff was always, don't take offense, Jeff. We were always like, oh yeah, man, Jeff has a good time. She was like, if Jeff's been promoted like 3 times in like 6 months at this Google place, maybe you should check it out. And so that night I remember reading up on pay-per-click ads. They had just started. It was under 2,000 employees, I think, at Google.
Wow.
I met Sheryl Sandberg and David Fisher and Emily White, and started working on that team. And I just didn't look back, because it became pretty clear to me that it was something special. And I thank God I did, because it was such a big change in my life.
Wow. That's awesome. And I can't imagine. I mean, I've read a few books on Google, and, in the early days, and I've heard podcasts, and especially when Eric Schmidt was brought in, he had to share an office with an engineer. But what was it like working in those early days, those small teams? Like, how did corporate development work in those days? And also, I'm quite interested. I didn't know that you worked and you met, early on, you worked with Sheryl Sandberg. How was it like to work with her? Like, what was that like early on? Because I imagine, and is she still similar to, it's like, does she still operate the same way she did back then today, do you think? She's now like a godlike figure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what was, even as a young person who was relatively inexperienced, when I went in there, it was clear that the caliber of talent and people that they were acquiring was really, really special. And I had to work my ass off to keep up and try to just do everything I could to push others, push myself. And I think, to compliment Sheryl, I think that's really what she was best at. And I think continues to today for the most part, which is she knows how to she squeezes every ounce of talent out of people. She knows how to get people to be fiercely competitive, how to just scramble, crawl, scratch, claw.
Wow.
To get work done. She's incredible motivator. She just knows how to move people and keep them moving. She also has like an Oprah-like talent for remembering names and faces and making people feel special. So years later, like I would see her and she would be like, she would look at me square in the face. I'm like, you don't know my name. And she would know it. She would be like, Ben, how's your family? You know, like she just knew the things about me. She's like, oh, how was that vacation? She just is that person. And that's what made her really, really special. I think there's some challenge.
Did it feel authentic? Because there's a difference between saying these things, but it probably felt like she was probably being authentic, right?
No, if you've ever spent time with great politicians on a national level, it's the same thing, which is that they can make every single person feel really, really special. It's a very unique talent, and you have to experience it to understand it. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and that's the way they describe Bill Clinton. You know, it's the same idea of just like when their eyes lock on you, and that's a sales skill. Like, and I've really tried to
Steve Jobs was famous for this, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think he was tough, but I think from what I understand is like when he gave you that look, like you were all in.
Yeah. Yeah. And so tell me about, so you were at Google, and I had met actually Chad Hurley around the time of that acquisition in 2007. How much more before, I think when did they make the announcement? Like,
well, so that's what I was telling. That's what I tell people is in 2005, you know, Google looked around. Google Video was just getting started. They're just starting video efforts. And because I had done that work in Singapore, they're like, Ben's qualified to work on video for Google. And so I think that when you follow your heart and you do stuff that really, truly intellectually interests you, it leads to good stuff. And it might not be exactly what you thought, and it might not be that you get paid to be a famous rock star or whatever it may be, but life takes twists and works out that direction. So I joined this little tiny video team with Google. We had, I don't know, a handful of people, like 10 people or something like that. The first day, this is a great story. The first day that we started really doing Google Video, we looked around at the competitors in the space. 15 companies. YouTube was not one of the top 15 competitors in the video space. 9 months later, we acquire them for a couple $2 billion, and I'm trying to figure out where Sam Bruno is to report to work. So, and so, you know, I joined that video team. I joined YouTube. They had about 22 people, I think. And so we were like a 35 person team. And it was just an incredible moment because video was having a moment. YouTube was having I felt like a celebrity, to be honest. Like I couldn't tell people what I did. We would have celebrities calling me every day, trying to figure out how to get onto YouTube, what was going on. Like I dealt with a lot of politicians. My colleague Adam Relis and I actually created the first for the 2008 election. We created the first like YouTube politics section of the site. We're just doing so much. I got the US government onto social media for the first time. We're just doing crazy, exciting stuff. Wow. And the thing about that time is like Google would say yes to everything unless they had to say no. And that's what's beautiful about that moment.
Amazing. And so so I'm interested from a corporate development perspective, you know, when you were saying that Google wasn't even on the top 15 list, are you saying when you were looking to acquire companies, they weren't on the top 15 in terms of usage, or are you saying that they weren't in terms of traffic at that time? I'd like to know a little bit.
Trying to figure out like who is going to win in the space, and looking at ourselves versus everybody else. And we were talking about Yahoo Video, we were talking about Daily Motion and Crackle, but YouTube wasn't even a top 15. We didn't even put them on the slide for competitors.
So how did you come across them, and why did you select
I think that people forget how fast YouTube happened. I mean, even today, the YouTube viral growth story is faster than any other platform I know. They're faster than Snap. They're much faster than Instagram. And there was a few reasons. I mean, they had, you know, it was the first time that you could embed a video clip into an email. And that sounds ridiculous, but it was like, when you figure out those small things on a platform and you incorporate them into your platform to create virality, to create distribution, and it's a real leap forward for platforms. And so YouTube had 2 or 3 of those, and it just happened so quickly. So it was very apparent to our management team that we had to buy YouTube. And YouTube also was running out of money. They had no money because it was such a runaway success. They didn't have enough money to even pay the hosting, fees and charges.
My goodness.
So they had to sell within a matter of weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And obviously that's my B school experience. To be honest, I didn't go to B school.
Yeah.
I had to learn on the fly. That was what happened.
Yeah.
And I think to sort of brag, I think I also had an understanding that this business, the online video business, really needed to shift from the Bay Area down to Los Angeles, because that's obviously content creation and production.
Right.
But the right people were down here. And so I had a series of conversations with people at YouTube and sort of finagled my way down to Los Angeles. At the time, Netflix was just getting going. And I was like, look, it'd be really good to have someone on the ground. And I got my superiors to say, okay. And then I got down here and it was like, oh man, I'm a valuable guy. I'm like a tech guy in like a media town. I'm really valuable.
Pretty like the first. You were probably the ambassador of the most important technology wave that was about to come into LA.
Yeah, I mean, the first week, like I was like definitely doing like I'd talk to like these producer guys. I'd be like, "Hey, let's get some babes and go out to dinner," and like I would actually go do that. These days, I don't do that, but like in that day, it was like, "Oh yeah, let's get sushi and party." I'm like, "All right, cool, let's do it."
You're like, "This town is fun."
Yeah.
Amazing. And so from a corporate development perspective, how did you work with studios, and what was your hook? Like, what was if there was like one learning lesson or like one kind of maiden tool in your war chest, how were you able? I mean, obviously Google and growth itself sells partnerships, but there's also a way to pitch things and the way to see value. What was the main thing that how you drove Hollywood value in content into YouTube?
Well, to answer
it
in a different way, I would still say even today in 2020, it might be a little bit underrated. What I fundamentally understood, and then some of my colleagues, like genius entrepreneurs like George Strompoulos and others, I think what we understood very early on was that YouTube personalities and video personalities, we didn't have the word influencers at that time. They influence, and they could sell a ridiculous amount of stuff. And we knew that. And so, for instance, we would have a party with CAA, and CAA they'd be like, "Oh, Oliver Stone might want to do something on your platform." When in reality, there were like these guys like that no one would ever look at. Like at the time, it was like Nigga Higa was like one of the big channels. And it was like, these guys are doing millions and millions of views, and people will buy whatever they say. They'll do whatever they say.
Wow.
And I think that fundamentally over the last decade here in Hollywood, I live in Los Angeles, we've had this shift where people have come to understand from a content creation perspective that influencers sell stuff in a much more immediate way than Hollywood stars do. The Brad Pitts of today are much less valuable than these online video influencers or Instagram influencers.
Is that because of the relatability? It's because you can relate with that person, or you build like
one, it's interactive. You actually feel like you're having a conversation. So your TV can now start to talk back and forth. Comments are really important. Going back and forth. Frequency. These YouTube people broadcast every single day. One of my favorite YouTube guys is a guy named Meet Kevin. Meet Kevin does 3 or 4 videos a day.
Oh wow.
That's different. They didn't think about it as a TV show that they're broadcasting once a week.
Yeah.
Different. And no one cares about production values. I mean, that's why you see like Quibi. Like everyone knew Quibi was DOA from 2016 in my industry. If you would ask, I would have told, we all knew it was like the biggest joke, because we're like, guess what? Production values, no one cares about the old Hollywood stuff.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So Quibi, I'm happy you mentioned that. There was a lot of like, speculation on it, and there were some people who were like kind of bullish on it. There was many people who weren't bullish on it. I didn't understand. I'm like, short form content, I can understand the value there, but production for mobile, and their whole kind of IP was like, oh, you can switch between, what is it, like landscape and normal mode quickly. I'm like, I didn't understand quite the value proposition. And of course, I've been wrong many times before. So I'm like, maybe I'm not seeing something here. But where do you think the future of Quibi is? Is it going to be acquired by somebody? Are they going to shut down? Is it a write-off for investors? Like, where do you think that this is going to be a major kind of case study for the industry if they can't bring it back on track, because billions of dollars was poured into it?
Yeah, I think my personal belief is it will probably be all of the above. You have leadership, senior leadership, are they're legends in the space. And there's too much money involved. So, and they've created some interesting creative assets. So, for example, YouTube moved Cobra Kai, their most successful original content series, onto Netflix recently.
By the way, I've been watching it. I freaking love it.
It's insanely good, right?
Yeah.
But that was YouTube's. That was not Netflix's.
I didn't know that was YouTube.
Pop. So I think you might see the same thing with the content assets. Those will go somewhere. I think that you will then have a series of write-offs. You'll take some of the technology pieces and spin them off somewhere else. And someone out there is going to definitely get screwed, but everyone will sort of figure out how to get by.
Yeah, I agree with that. Fast forward. So what are you up to these days? Tell me about Chancebending Ventures.
Yeah, so I mean, it's amazing how fast, like I said, you get old in this industry. I just turned 45 this year, and I feel like I'm an ancient dinosaur. And if I'm being very honest, I think it would be difficult for me to go work at a Microsoft or a Google or a Facebook again. I've created startups, I've sold startups. And so over the last bunch of years, I've had to find interesting ways of just staying in this ecosystem. So I invest in startups, I advise startups. I'm doing whatever I can to stay close to founders. I don't think I'm going to start anything from totally zero. I have incubated a few things. I sell a cell phone cleaning wipe on Amazon called Dirty Phone. Like, I do stuff. I just love being creative. I love the really early process. And I've found a way, by investing in founders, by getting involved in startups, by making things happen, I've sort of carved out this space here in LA for myself where, yeah, if you're a promising startup, you're looking for funding, you're trying to figure out the next steps early on.
Right.
And especially if you're in digital media, you're calling me. And like that's been really good for my personal brand.
Right. Love that. Tell me a bit about, so you mentioned several things. What opportunity or project or kind of area are you most excited about at the current moment that you're working on?
Yeah, I'm really,
and I'm not asking, and I know it's hard to choose your favorite child, so maybe there's a lot of things that you're working on, so you don't have to be just one, but what's top of mind for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think where I sit here in LA, it's still very much, and it will just continue to go. It's all about these platforms and e-commerce working together. I would say in a very macro sense, the first 20, 25 years of the internet was dominated by ad-supported business models. And we're now in this shift. We've seen the rise of subscription and we're seeing direct e-commerce just explode. So one of the startups I've been really from day one been working with is a company called Bonsai out of Toronto. The company's really interesting. They basically help publishers create direct e-commerce businesses. So what that means is, instead of working with an affiliate and sending, let's say GQ does an article on the top 5 swimsuits to wear this summer, instead of sending someone to Nordstrom to buy that swimsuit, GQ says, you know what? Why don't we just sell you the swimsuit directly from this article? Bonsai helps that happen. So that startup, and Andres, I believe you're in the middle of it with me at this point.
That's right. I am involved in that one.
But we've made a series of investments in the company. We're helping them raise funding. They're growing like a weed.
Disclosure, I am an investor in that company.
A major deal with BuzzFeed, or they did announce a major deal with BuzzFeed, and the business is just exploding.
It is exploding.
So that's one of the main things I'm working on. And in general, it's all about the same thing, which is enabling businesses to have direct access to a customer and creating businesses around it, whether it's subscription, direct e-commerce, or fees, or SaaS, or whatever it may be. Ad supported has just, I believe it's just from a different time at this point.
Right. Yeah. And and just my 2 cents is like, I like to think of Bonsai as native e-commerce. In-house, it feels and looks like a publisher's own kind of checkout and e-commerce solution for what they're writing or talking about, and that is very different.
What's the website? What's their website? I should know offhand.
I think it's shopbonsai.ca because it's
shopbonsai.ca. Yeah, people should check it out. It's exploding. It's super exciting. Our pipeline is quite full. And
it is one of the fastest growing hyperscaling startups I've seen personally. So thanks for involving me on that one early, because that was actually yours from the early days. Yeah. That's awesome. Switching across, because I know we're at the tail end of our show, and I know you're a busy father and have a million other things to get going, and we had to push this at an hour because I got caught up in something else. So I want to be respectful of your time. How are you staying fit? I mean, it looks like you have a Peloton behind you. Are you using it that often, or
I'm on Peloton almost every day. Okay. I'm a big again, tooting my horn a little bit. I bought a ridiculous amount of Peloton stock this year early. And I think that I tell people this all the time: experiment with stuff. I've been doing all this fractional ownership of art, not because I think I'm going to make a lot of money. I just want to know how things work. So I got like
sneakerheads, for example. Yeah, I got some friends that are involved in trading sneakers. I was like, what was it called, StockX? And I have some friends that do that, and they're like, you would never think they're part of that demographic. And yeah, it's really interesting. There's all sorts of asset classes that you can uncover. Totally. And so art is one of them for you. What are you doing in art?
I think I own something like 6 or 7 major, or a fractional piece of 6 or 7 major pieces. People like Banksy and everybody else. But I just like seeing how these platforms work early. And I think with Peloton, I think it would be easy to say, yeah, this is just an expensive fad, and that people will move. Exercise is all about fads. But when you look at the platform, they start with hardware, but the software as a platform has become so strong. They're moving across so many different spaces. The lock-in is so strong. It's sticky. Yeah. There's no way you're leaving. You cannot leave the platform. And I think that's what people don't really understand. You get attached to all the trainers. I follow all the trainers on Instagram, and they're real to me. There's no way if Peloton wanted to raise their monthly subscription by $10, no one would flinch. I wouldn't flinch. And so I think that business has infinite room to run because of that. So yeah, the PE ratio is a little bit high at this moment, when it's between $90 to $100. Yeah. But in terms of the growth, this is going to be an over $100 billion company.
You're that bullish.
I'm that bullish. Yeah. Wow. And you have to have it. You have to have it to know it. I don't have a Tesla. But if I had, I wish I did. I wish I had bought a Tesla 4 years ago, because then I would have known the same thing.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I'm in that same camp.
Yeah.
Last question. How are you? So I assume because you have a family, you're mostly cooking at home. Who's the chef in the house? Or are you guys mostly Postmating, or what's the food situation like?
It's mostly my wife making food we're embarrassed about for the kids. It's macaroni and cheese and chicken.
That's fine.
And stuff. And then unfortunately I eat it, and then I have to get on the Peloton. So
it's this virtuous cycle. And final question. I've noticed that during COVID, I've definitely been drinking a lot more wine during the work week than I typically have. Are you experimenting with any mixology or?
Well, here's my thing. I don't know what's going on with White Claw, because I actually do find them weirdly seductive, but I feel like you get this weird White Claw hangover the next day. That's it's a different type of hangover.
They call that the claw.
Do they call it that?
Oh, I just made it up.
Oh, yeah. So if anyone out there knows about the White Claw hangover, because I feel like I feel like it needs to be a thing. It's I go to dark play. I would have 2, and then I would wake up the next day and be like,
Oof.
Not suicidal, but I'd be like, oh God. So that's what I want to know about. If anyone out there can answer that for me, please let me know.
I'll find out. I actually had a few White Claws this past year. I didn't have the hangover, but maybe I should experiment and do another trial and let you know. Or it could be a food sensitivity. By the way, you'd be surprised. People don't realize everyone's body is like a snowflake, and they have all sorts of triggers. And I think the alcohol that they distill that's used in White Claw, I think is potato based. But there's all sorts of crap in like anything that's processed, could be anything. And so food sensitivity, I know we're a little off topic, but for those who are gonna watch this later and listen on Spotify later, food sensitivity is a real thing, and everyone should have that test. I didn't realize like egg yolk and salmon and chickpeas were food sensitivities of mine, and they would make me often feel like I would be hungover the next day without me actually knowing why. So perhaps the claw might have some other confounding variables there for you, Ben.
Well, I definitely think gut health. I love gut health stuff, and like I think that's a really great investable category, actually.
Huge. Awesome. Hey, Ben, love talking to you today. Thank you so much for joining the CorpDev.Ninja show. Thank you for being accommodating, for moving it up a bit. And for all of our listeners out there, Ben Smith is a true corporate development ninja. You heard his background. And if you want to follow up with any of the stuff that we've spoken today regarding, feel free to do so. And this will be posted across YouTube, LinkedIn, and on the CorpDev.Ninja website. Again, weekly, Thursday or Friday, 25-minute episodes with all things Corp Dev, truths from the trenches from top people and businessmen and businesswomen around the world. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andres.
Thank you.